Hi there, and welcome back to Music Therapy and Beyond. This week, I am so excited to bring to you a really dynamic and inspirational conversation with the Creative Dementia Collective. They are self-described as three millennial women who are passionate about de-stigmatizing and personalizing dementia care. Together, they have a collective 30-plus years of experience in the senior care industry, where they all noticed the gaps in supporting people living with dementia and their loved ones. The Creative Dementia Collective was born to fill those gaps and begin to shift the culture of dementia care. The collective is comprised of Kaylee Allen, a board-certified music therapist, Erin Statiker, a certified positive approach to care or PAC independent trainer, and JL Weinberg, a licensed mental health practitioner and registered art therapist. These gals are going to bring us a power-packed conversation that I hope is going to inspire you in the work that you do with those living with dementia and their care partners, as well as inspire you in your own journey of caring for your loved ones. Their work and approach really targets deconstructing our beliefs and stigmas surrounding conversations of dementia, dying, and grief, and gives us a way to move forward to support those that we love and work with. Let's get to the conversation so that you can hear it straight from them. Well, welcome to Music Therapy and Beyond, everybody. I'm so excited to have the Creative Dementia Collective on the podcast. And as a reminder to everybody listening, you can watch this episode on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to check out all of our beautiful faces. So thank you guys so much. I want you all to introduce yourselves to everybody. So tell us who you are, what you do, and maybe where you're from too. Who wants to start?
I'll start. My name is Kaylee Allen. I am the board certified music therapist of the group. I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest. And I bring all of the music therapy stuff to our collective. And I also am the owner of the sweetest pit bull named Rosemary. And she is a pet therapy certified dog.
Yay. We love that.
She's our fourth furry member.
Yeah.
Doesn't play too well on podcasts though.
Unfortunately.
My name's Erin Statiker. I am a dementia educator. I'm a certified independent trainer with Positive Approach to Care, which is Teepa Snow's organization. And I bring the dementia education piece. And on the side, I also run a memory care. So when we're not working with our clients who are doing this journey at home, I serve a whole bunch of people who are doing it in a care setting.
Very cool.
And I am JL Weinberg. I am a licensed mental health counselor and art therapist, registered art therapist. And I am originally from Los Angeles, moved to New York City when I was 18 and lived there for nearly 8 years, and then have been in Seattle ever since then. And I bring the element of art therapy and also a big focus on legacy work to the Creative Dementia Collective.
Very cool. So we've been talking about the Creative Dementia Collective. What is that collective all about, and when did it started? How, when, and what?
So we each of us actually started in this industry working at a community care setting with one of the larger senior living and memory care communities, each at our own different locations and each kind of like keeping an eye on each other. Like, ooh, did you hear what Erin's doing over over in her neighborhood? That's really cool. And oh, JL, you need to meet JL. She's really cool. So we were like all kind of like knew of each other. But there are limits within that type of setting. And of course, in any type of corporate structure, the creativity that you have on the ground and the resources that you have, how much say you have in exactly how you spend your day and what your programs look like, can be a little bit limiting for creative people like ourselves. So when we got together, we were like, you know what? We have more that we want to do. We have more that we feel like we can do independently. So we started a business in 2020, and pivoted and pivoted and pivoted. We started it in that, I think our first like meeting where we were like, let's start a business was late 2019. And then we started it, I think like April 2020, when everybody was like, couple more weeks, like just a few more weeks.
Those were the days.
So we were like, yeah, let's just get all our stuff together and then we'll be ready to hit the ground running when everything opens back up. Of course, we know how that worked out. So like Erin said, we tend to work mostly with people who are caring for loved ones living with dementia at home. That was a particularly large need right there in 2020 and continues to be. We also do work with some professional caregivers in the community setting as well. But our big kind of mission is to work with the people living with dementia, as we often do as therapists in hands-on ways, music therapy and art therapy, and in Erin and doing activities and running the memory care setting. But also that missing piece too often is not supporting those care partners who are actually like in the trenches doing the work, giving them the background and the tools and the know-how to really do the day-to-day, but also shift their perspective a little bit on it as well and kind of take a step back when it gets overwhelming in the moment.
Absolutely. And I want to get to asking you all about your philosophy behind what you do, because I'm starting to hear what the heart is behind it peek out a little bit. But I think leading up to that, I would love to hear from each of you what drew you or made you passionate about working with those living with dementia and also their care partners. What makes you want to do that each day?
Yeah, I'll briefly answer and then Jael will have her own version of it. So I started in this industry about 10, 11 years ago, and it was totally by happenstance. There's a lot of us who, we don't set out at early college days saying, oh, I want to, when I grow up, I want to work in senior living and elder care. That was not my plan, believe it or not, but I kind of ended up in this industry, by a series of fortunate events. And I started out doing activities and programming, and then really saw how special that could be in a memory care setting. And like so many other people, I was really well-intentioned. I had the heart for it. I had the spirit for it, but I did not have the know-how. So I saw myself quickly approaching that burnout. Like, I really want to be here. I want to be doing good, meaningful work, that, makes me feel connected to my grandparents, all of that. But I didn't have the skill training, and the company that I was with didn't provide us with that kind of skills training. So I sought it out on my own. And I ended up, adding certifications and know-how. And, once I started to understand the population of people that I was serving, it was like light bulbs, right? And I was so much better at my job. I was able to connect with them in a really meaningful and real way. And then that is what has me want to do the work I do now. I want to be that person that sets off a light bulb for somebody else, right? Because it can be really rewarding, and it's some of the most tender, intimate, precious work that can be done. but you have to
Absolutely.
have a basic foundation of knowledge to be able to do it without burning out.
Yeah.
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 Dale, what about you?
I came into this work, like I found myself inside of it before I realized what I was doing, almost in a way. When I was in graduate school, back in New York, our program, we have a full year internship with each year of the master's program. And my first year internship was at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, in their geriatric psychiatric inpatient unit. And I loved working with older adults. I've always been like, even as a young kid, loved hanging out with the adults. I think there's like a meme floating around now that's like people being like, oh, you're an old soul. Like, and it's like, thanks, it's the trauma, you know?
Right.
But I think that like from a very young age, I was just thinking about the world and life in a like a complex way that I didn't even know what was going on, which is probably why I ended up with so much anxiety throughout most of my life. But after working at Mount Sinai, I realized, like, oh, I really love this population. And then when I moved to Seattle, I was looking for a job and there were openings in the senior living industry. And I kind of just showed up trying to get my foot in the door. And when I described my background and what I do, the people that were hiring were like, oh, art therapy, that's so amazing. We don't have an art therapist. Can you come and do that? I was like, yes. So I just kind of walked straight into it. And it's only like in review and looking at my life story that makes sense why and how I kind of ended up doing this work. And for most of my life, I had a lot of anxiety around death and dying and kind of obsessive intrusive thoughts about like losing my mind and going crazy and all of those things. And it's really like deep true meaning of irony that I ended up working with people at end of life who are quote unquote like losing their minds in the eyes of everybody else. And so I believe that like a part of me kind of needed to work that all out. And that's how I found my way to this field. And I mean, it has been very healing for me. But I'm so passionate about helping the rest of us take looks at the parts of this work that nobody wants to talk about. And I'll touch on that a little bit more when we talk about our philosophy, but that's what really keeps bringing me back to this work day after day is like having these conversations again and again with people that are so scared to look and talk about this idea or this realm of the work that we do.
I think, and I am so excited for you guys to speak more to this too, but I think one thing that is so interesting about this kind of niche area that you all are really honing in on is there's a lot of fear around those conversations and diagnosis.
Yes.
And it is a scary thing, and it can be, especially at first. And if you are living with someone who's going through that, it can be really difficult. But I love the personal connection that you both have made so far in your journeys. Kaylee, what about you?
Yeah, so I initially was going to work with kids. I love kids. I love the creativity and getting to be silly. But I found that I was really burnt out at the end of the day working with kids. Turns out I love to hang out with kids and not work with kids. And actually, I discovered through my internship, I was working with somebody in private practice who did myriad things, but one of the big places we went was memory care, and I found I really enjoyed that work. And I was like, well, let's try that out. And a lot of the stuff I really enjoyed about working with kids, getting to be silly, creativity, loss of inhibitions, all that sort of stuff is still present in dementia care, but I'm not chasing them around the room, which is great. Usually there's an exception sometimes. So that's how like logistically I got there. But my initial hesitancy to go there was it felt a little too close to home. My dad is living with dementia from a traumatic brain injury, and I thought, yeah, I won't be able to like compartmentalize, and it'll be too much But it has ended up being really, really lovely. And I have now, in this season of my life, actually become his care partner. I should make a note. We say care partner instead of caregiver in our group. We don't want to do care to people. We want to partner with them in their care. And that can kind of go both ways. That allows some autonomy, that allows some freedom, and a little bit more recognizing that person as a fully formed human rather than the sum of their diagnoses or behaviors. So that's how I ended up. And then plus it's fantastic music. So as a music therapist, I get to do the Great American Songbook and big band jazz. And now in this season of my career, I'm leaning more into like folk music revival and early rock and roll. So it's, you can't complain. It's great music. So.
No, yeah, that's maybe one of the best things about what we get to do is just great music all the time. So speaking of philosophy, could you guys kind of tell me about the philosophy of the collective and then how each of your individual philosophies fit into that? It's kind of this cool collage of work that you all are doing.
Yeah. And before, I'm going to let JL take that question, but before we do that, I just want to define a couple of terms that you've probably already heard us say, and you'll definitely hear us say more. So Kaylee already defined care partner. You'll hear us use that a lot. We invite you all to try that on in your speaking versus, caregiver or caretaker or something like that. The other one is dementia. So we are referring to a big umbrella term that is composed of like 125 different types, forms, causes, essentially of brain change. So that does include Alzheimer's disease. It does include vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body, things like that. But it really is referred to as that umbrella term. And just 4 things that are true about all dementias, because they're all very, very different. They all present in different ways. They change somebody's brain chemically and structurally in different ways. But 4 things are true about all of them. 2 parts of the brain are dying, at least. It is chronic, so it's not curable or fixable at this point. It's progressive. It does keep changing and it will get worse. And ultimately it is terminal. So those are the 4 things that all dementias have in common. So when we're using that term loosely, again, it's an umbrella term. And then you'll hear us say it's a person living with dementia. You'll often hear, somebody suffering with dementia or a dementia patient or an Alzheimer's patient. First of all, it's not our place to say whether somebody's suffering with it or not.
Which is true for all diagnoses.
Which is true for all diagnoses.
For anything.
Yeah. Whatever it is. Yeah, absolutely. They're a person first and they are living with a disease. So how they're living with it is not our business to allocate. So just wanted to define those right up at the top of the conversation and then let JL take that answer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to have right in the front of our brains as we continue.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, Erin, because it tees up even more information about why we do things the way that we do things, right? And so one of our main goals as the Creative Dementia Collective is to destigmatize the conversation around dementia, aging, and death, right? So we can't move forward. We can't find our way through. We can't help people in their quality of life if we can't look at what's going on, if we can't talk about what's going on. And dementia is this kind of like special nugget of all of the deepest collective fears of our current Western society and culture. It hits like a multi-punch of our fear buttons, right? It is this thing of aging, right? We as a collective hate aging. Youth forever, fountain of youth, aging is irrelevant, right? It ties so deeply into capitalism, right? Of like, if our bodies aren't able to produce goods, we're worthless, right? So that tethers really deeply into this thing of I'm aging and growing older. Don't want to take a look at that. It also touches on this thing of Western society prioritizes intellectual understanding and like brain knowledge above all else. We're not super on board as a whole with like deep wisdom, soul knowledge, intuition. That's always secondary or like a helpful extra, right? And so when you're losing your ability to compete intellectually, which is the pinnacle. I say that quote unquote. I obviously do not believe that, but our culture prioritizes it that way. So that's also very scary. And then this element of understanding time and the experience of disconnection. I mean, as human beings, the scariest thing we can fathom is feeling disconnected. It's, we're babies and we have our first abandonment wound the moment, we cry out for something and our whoever's caring for us does not show up. It's devastating, right?
Yeah.
And so that stays so deep in the psyche. I think for most people, it's just, they don't want to look at this idea of I could be someone that society doesn't find valuable, that is not able to contribute intellectually or like cognitively in that same way that I used to. And people aren't going to want to touch me. They aren't going to want to be in relationship with me. They're going to be afraid of me and my experience. And so all those things put together make dementia this kind of like shush thing, the way that talking about cancer used to be. So we really want to destigmatize that conversation so we can actually get people involved and understand like what's actually going on and why are we so afraid of all of these things, and how does our fear negatively impact our ability to care for people, to show up and do the work that we do,
or even acknowledge that there is a conversation to be had.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's like part of our philosophy too, is one of the bigger things that we do is help care partners kind of, once we're destigmatizing this conversation, to like better connect and better care for their loved ones and kind of go with that journey that is ever changing. And we love alliteration. So our pillars are head, hands, heart, humanity. And that really describes our process. We start with the head. We start with, I need to wrap my brain around what is going on. Why does she do that? What is that about? And once we have a better understanding of that, we can then use our big brains to make a different choice in how we're approaching things or how we're looking at things. We go from there to get hands-on and like physically, okay, practically, what are we doing? Because when people come to us, we love to be existential, but they're usually in overwhelm and in crisis and just, I need to get through the day and this is not working anymore. So we focus early on those hands-on skills. What can we do differently? How can we adapt our routines? Let's get our hands in the game. And then once they kind of like feel, oh, okay, this is working, I'm understanding a different approach, it opens our hearts to that connection. That's where the music and art, the creative piece, and the legacy work really starts to come in. You can't really get there when you're in crisis. And we always wrap around at the end of our work with our clients with humanity. And I like this in two different meanings. Humanity as community, as who are we connected in a broad sense as human beings in this experience of life, but also recognizing, again, like we said before, that humanity of the person living with dementia. There can be this language of like, that's not my mom, or that's not her anymore. And or they're a shell of themselves. And while there is some realness in that grief and that loss of them changing key parts of who you recognize and who you remember for their identity as mom, not their whole self, they're still in there. They're still very much human. And in a lot of ways, stripped of some of the societal expectations that we tend to put on through our journeys. Those layers tend to come off. And at the very core of it, there is a lot of humanity in there.
And that goes exactly with what Jael was saying too, about like when you have the education piece, which Erin, I think it's cool that you started with how that was so important for your journey getting into this work, right? Like having that piece, then you can kind of deconstruct what we have been so steeped in societally and culturally around this whole conversation. And it is a big one. There's a lot of layers, like you said, and taking those off. I think what is left is something that can be so beautiful, which is something that gets so overlooked when we're talking about this. I think there's so many negative adjectives and attitudes that surround the dementia conversation. I'm putting that in air quotes. But everything that you guys are saying is so empowering and beautiful, and the connection that can come when you shift the way that you're viewing it, and you kind of shift and put aside maybe some of the things that after you've worked through them, that there's like fertile ground for so much growth for care partners and society and those living with dementia. You know, they have to work through all of that too. And so there's just so much dimension to this, but so much room for a really beautiful shift in perspective. So I love that that's what you guys are bringing to the table.
I'm glad that's what you saw in what we just shared.
Yeah,
we agree.
And I think too, you know, two of you mentioned burnout and getting into this work. And I think that's also a very real thing for not only for the care partners that you're working with, but also as like service providers in the elder care industry. That's a really real thing. You see it all the time. I've talked to so many and been in enough facilities and talked to people that work in them that, you know, it's a real thing. And with all the staff shortages and just limited resources, like you mentioned, the frustration is real. And it sometimes maybe feels like you're just running up against wall after wall when you're trying to do better work. But I'm curious, you know, for those of us that are working in assisted living or memory care in those types of places, do you have advice on how to maybe be some of the change that needs to happen in these encounters, or when we're having conversations with people in these facilities? What is your encouragement or advice to people that are wanting to really bring a voice of light and kind of be that light and bring this conversation forward?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think part of that burnout piece comes so much from the isolation, doing really, really good, heart-centered, like emotionally laborious work behind closed doors, behind, you know, which are often like locked or, you know, secured or keypad protected, like literally protected from the outside world and not having any visibility. So I think if you're somebody in that environment, if that kind of work resonates with you and you feel like this could potentially be a career path for you, like find every way possible to connect with, you know, the greater dementia community, you know, have a really good support system, have people, you know, who are doing similar work to you that you staying connected with, making sure that the work you do, you know, whether it's tangible or emotional, is visible and it's seen and it's witnessed. Because if you're trying to do this by yourself, it's just not sustainable. So yeah, connect, you know, with support groups, connect with other professionals, you know, find you know, social media accounts that can really like mirror back to you the experience, your lived experience every day. Like, I don't know what it is, but expand outside of your own community. I think it makes a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. What about self-care? Because I think that's something that also comes into play here. And Yeah, no, what is that? I mean, but really,
we have a whole segment on self-care and the work that we do with people. Yeah. So
really, okay. So how does that work, or how does that maybe look for those that you work with, but also for yourselves? Like, what does that look like for you to stay filled up in the work that you're doing when you're giving so much?
Yeah. We emphasize self-care. I think it can become, especially like in our culture today, kind of like a buzzword that doesn't really mean anything and is used to sell bath salts.
Yeah. I was going to make a joke about baths, but I didn't want to say it in case, because I love taking baths. But
nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I love a bath. But it becomes like a commodity and a product. Buy this thing and this will be your self-care. And self-care is really much more than that. We've actually been, the three of us, recently having conversations about like numbing as self-care, dissociation as self-care. Like sometimes that's what you need. like obviously everything in its place and everything in moderation. You don't want to be completely zoned out all the time, but that can be completely appropriate and absolutely an evolutionary skill that serves us.
It is a natural response. I mean, that is like your body taking care of you when those things are happening with the resources that it has. So recognizing that there is a time and a place for that, I think is actually really powerful.
It's empowering because we get the messaging like self-care is only yoga and bubble baths and massages. But
self-care is not XYZ.
And it can look differently on different days. If I have a ton of energy and I want to do my skincare routine, like that's great. If I'm burnt out, makeup wipes. Like it's going to look different on different days. We can't predict our energy and our changes in that, particularly when we're working in this field where dementia is a moving target. And I actually just listened to somebody speak on sustainability versus consistency. When you're making a practice for yourself, the goal isn't to be consistent with it because our lives are not consistent and the factors that come into every day are not consistent.
I sure wish they were.
Be sustainable. Right.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice?
It'd be amazing. But yeah, we have a whole section about this in the workbook that I am an at-home care partner and I like to have my certain routines, but there are times where it's like, that's not going to do it for me today, but I also don't have the energy to think of something. So to like take this workbook off the shelf and like flip to the self-care section and be like, what do I want to do today? Do I want, this prompt? Do I want to draw on this mandala? It's really nice to like take the brain work out of it and take that extra labor step out of it and just kind of make it automatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we talk a lot too with our clients about like deconstructing why self-care even matters, right? Like to its core. And as care partners, there are a lot of intersecting factors that make caring for oneself or prioritizing oneself not accessible or really feel very elusive, right? A lot of people who are like provide care in their life or partner in care are women or femmes, right? They're at-home care partners. A lot of them are like daughters or wives, right? They're people of all genders that provide care, but this maternal caring energy, even as archetype in our culture, is one of selflessness, and this expectation of giving of the self for others, and how problematic that can be when you need it to be sustainable. And so there's this other little kind of asterisk in self-care of it's not just caring for oneself enough to get back to the grind of doing the labor. It is, how do I keep myself alive and enlivened as a human being on this whole journey, right? And I think that is where, like what Kaylee was saying about the kind of commodification of it is like, buy this thing, quick fix, get back, to the work
Like a
you were doing and
Band-Aid.
work harder, right? Yeah. So that kind of thing of how do we start to shine light on the ways that we're holding on to stories of how we ought to be as care partners that are maybe patriarchal or misogynistic or whatever, and then addressing those as well. That's also self-care, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting at it at a deeper level instead of just the surface of a face mask to cure all of your, fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Again,
And
no
like,
shade on face masks. I love those too. I do them. I probably need to do more, but that's, that's
like
not as
face masks.
sustainable.
Yeah. Face masks are super important and can be really wonderful. And also like, they're not going to dismantle the establishment on their own. They're just, they're a sheet of paper,
Right.
But like what Kaylee was talking about earlier of, the head, hands, heart, and humanity, this self-care topic is such a great example of the different facets of that, of when someone comes to us in crisis or in a state of overwhelm, I'm not going to come at them being like, we need to like dismantle the establishment through your thought process. No, of course not. We're going to get them resources that make it feel like they can breathe and move through a day, right? And then we kind of layer on it and deepen the conversation to make it feel like, oh, this is why this is actually so important and why I need to keep prioritizing this.
Well, and rather than just, piling on top of the overwhelm, which, by the way, I love everything that you were describing, the head, hands, heart, humanity piece really parallels like a trauma-informed care approach also, which I love. So I wanted to put that out there. It's almost like you guys are, I don't know, it's like it was on purpose or something. But what you're saying is not that you're just adding to the overwhelm, which I love. You are meeting people exactly where they are, coming alongside of them, partnering with them, and then giving them resources, but also empowering them to pull from their own resources, which I love. It's a very like resource oriented kind of approach to what you're doing, rather than here, we're going to fix this and we're going to fix this. And here's your step-by-step, to get through this diagnosis thing. You know what I mean? It's so much deeper than that. And it's like, you're helping them figure out what they need to do to not just like survive, but to really live. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And on and in any given day, you could, need 10 different tools, pull from those different resources, from face masks to mail or meal delivery to community support group to dismantling the patriarchy, and pull from each one of those tools at any given time. So the self-care gamut runs wide, runs deep and wide.
We were talking about so much of the hang up of like the burnout of like, God, I'm a terrible care partner, or, oh my God, like I just was the worst music therapist today, or whatever it may be, is using the wrong tool, right? Like the more tools you have, the more you have to pull from. But if you're presented with an issue or a problem in that moment and you don't necessarily have the tool for it, you don't have the background for it, it's a new thing for you, like you're going to feel like a failure. But it is exactly what you're saying. It's about access to those support systems. It's about access to different types of tools and different types of approaches that are going to serve you in different ways at different times.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing I wanted to ask about, speaking of different things at different times and pulling from your support systems, I'm really curious if you guys could speak a little bit to what co-treating looks like in your collective and working together with all of your modalities and approaches to be this really cool collective of resources. Could you guys speak to that a little bit too?
Yeah, JL, do you want to start us, and I'll tag team if there's.
For sure. Yeah. So kind of our philosophy is really rooted in community, right? And like we were talking about these different tools, all three of us bring different things to the table, and we all share the same philosophy and the same kind of heart-centeredness anchor of what we do in this work. And we all have different areas of specialty and genius in the work that we do. And so for an example, right, we know through the research that expansive treatment teams lead to better outcomes, right? If
Absolutely.
no matter what the thing being addressed is, the more people that are invested in one's care, the better the outcome, period, right? And so that's kind of like how we show up and approach this. Is if we are approaching it from what can I learn, how do I express, how do I preserve, all of these things from the different angles, people feel very seen and held in that experience, which to be in a space of feeling extreme overwhelm and isolation, to feeling very seen, not just by one person, but multiple people at the same time, with deep compassion. I think that's really like relieving for a lot of people. And then to kind of specifically speak about when Kaylee and I combine forces in art therapy and music therapy at the same time, it's also a cognitive buffet, right? An experiential somatic buffet as well, of expressing in the visual realm, expressing in the sonic realm, the haptic realm, right? Like touch, and how do we feel and move around our environment. That's something that can really level up a expressive therapies experience, right? Of having the right playlist, the right tone of the environment while people are creating art on a particular topic can really enhance the experience, especially for dementia, because we need a lot of cues to kind of stay grounded in what we're doing. So when we come together and combine that into that kind of expressive arts therapies, at the same time, I think especially for people living with dementia, like Erin said in the beginning, right? Dementia means that two or more parts of your brain are dying simultaneously. So all of the ways that we can show up for multiple senses simultaneously lead to better engagement and better outcome as well.
Absolutely. There's so much
Yeah.
research behind all of that it's like,
Yes.
why wouldn't you? Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
just
And it
like-
takes, sorry, one last thing, like it takes some pressure off of us too, of we are really pushing against this thing of one person has to be everything to another person. We same for us, right? I don't have to be the only one showing up for someone who needs support. I have a team supporting me as well, and that alleviates the intensity kind of across the board.
Because we are not meant to be islands.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and another benefit of our co-treatment model is, you know, there are so many different types of learners. People who really want to, you know, experience something and take it in visually, or, you know, really need to get in their body to have it integrate, or really want to, you know, be that kind of existential learner. So it's going to reach people in different ways, and we each have a really different way of presenting our information. So it's just such a, we created this analogy once of like shining a flashlight. Like one person holding a flashlight beaming out is going to shed light on whatever's directly in front of that person. But imagine the three of us standing back to back in a circle, all holding a flashlight out. It's going to just broaden what we can shed light on, just because we each bring a different view, a different perspective, and a different skill set. So we just have a much better chance of like having a bigger catch-all, for folks who receive and learn in different ways. So, you know, we can present things visually with slides and PowerPoints, or musically, or, you know, through group conversations. If you're somebody who likes to process, you know, really interpersonally, and for our intrapersonal folks, it's like maybe you want to like flip through this app and really like guide yourself on that self-discovery. So, you know, and our workbooks give a similar kind of, you know, self-guided teaching tool. So anyway, that's another perk of having that co-treatment model. And it's not like any one of our specialties is, you know, it's a non-hierarchical model. Not one is not better than the other. but they're super symbiotic, like you're saying. Like it really works when you combine those different elements and do them in a really intentional kind of sequence. It has the best outcome we've found.
That is so awesome. I love that. I think, yeah, that's so great.
Thank you.
Now, a couple of you have alluded to this workbook, and I know what that is, but could somebody explain this amazing resource? Because I want to make sure that our listeners know where to go check this out for themselves. So tell me about these workbooks.
Kaylee?
Yeah. Sorry, my internet lagged for a moment. I'm here. Yes. So we have a pair of workbooks. They can work independently, just great. One is for care partners. This is professional or personal. And the other one is for people living with dementia. They work best. They're kind of supercharged when you use them together. And they both present information and offer hands-on tools and experientials, but they're geared completely differently, right? The care partner one has a lot of like written information, educational stuff, and step-by-step instructions for leading your loved one through maybe an art therapy informed experience or a music experience. If you're like, I'm not an artist, I don't know what I'm doing, it really does walk you through it step by step. And then the loved one legacy workbook is really just that. It's a legacy workbook. It has a lot of the same information that is on the corresponding pages, but just presented a lot more visually or with more cues to like get up and actually do something. And it's meant for people at all stages. And we really designed it thoughtfully with that in mind. One of the things that I really love about it is it's kind of a living document. You can go back and revisit some of these prompts and some of these pages as you're going along this journey and as things are changing, and you'll get a different process, a different response, a different result on all these different days. And then at the end of it all, what's really precious, just speaking from a care partner point of view, is I have this tangible legacy item that has, dad's writing about his signature song and why that song is important for him. And it has the self-portrait that he drew. It has those really beautiful, precious things for me. And without getting like too existential into it, that I think important about our work is, being along this journey brings up a lot of our fears about death, dying, loss, being less useful, right? All of that sort of stuff and letting go. And one of the ways that we can begin to address that fear is with legacy work. It just feels really comforting to have something that you can hold on to when so much of this process is, I can't hold on to anything. I'm letting go of a lot of things. But people can learn more about it. We post about it all the time on our social medias, and you can find it on our website, creative-dementiacollective.com, and look at it more there.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I want to make sure everybody knows about that, because that's really amazing. And I'm so thankful that you guys all have come together to create that resource, because that's really, really valuable. As we kind of begin to wrap up the conversation, there's something that I want to ask each of you. What do you wish that people at large, the general public, knew about dementia? Maybe this could be debunking a myth or a common misconception, but what do you wish that people knew about it?
Such a good question. Do you want each of us to answer?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind.
We talked about this a little bit on our phone call, but for me, you'll have that experience of telling somebody what you do, and their reaction is like, that's terrible. That's so hard. I can never do that. And I really wish people could open their eyes to the beauty of it. I think because of our existential fears about our own loss of grip on reality and our own eventual progression into end of life, a lot of people tend to turn away for people walking that path. But if you would keep your eyes open, there are just so many beautiful moments that are right in front of you every day. And there's a really profound, I think it's such a profound act of love to stay with somebody through that process and to walk with them hand in hand and to greet them as they are and not who you remember them to be or who you think they should be. That's a really profound, authentic way to love somebody. And I don't know, like when I think about my dad, I think about some of the relationships he has. They try to kind of keep him in the box. You're my brother. You're my cousin. You have to be this way. And we always related on this. And so we have to continue to relate. And it's very easy as an adult child to kind of fall into that and to kind of allow myself to step out of that. Allows me to, as he continues in this disease and in some ways returns to a more childlike self, we can kind of be more like buddies and like playmates. And, he's a musician. And so we can he, of course, grew up in the 60s and 70s. So he would, smoke with his friends and listen to records. And obviously we don't do that together, but it can be the same vibe of like, tell me about why this record, really, why do you think this is so far out? Like, yeah, Bob Dylan has some really groovy lyrics. Ooh, let's read his lyrics. Like, there's something really beautiful in meeting that person where they are and not turning away because of your own baggage.
Thank you for sharing that and for saying that. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
What I wish everyone knew about dementia or people living with dementia is that it's not only about memory loss, and that there's so much else that changes that, a changing brain or a dying brain can affect in a human being. That's so far beyond memory. Memory loss, in fact, is one of the last things that actually is impacted when somebody's living with dementia. So, denial has a time and place in everybody's life. It can be a super helpful coping mechanism. Like, denial is appropriate and valid at times. However, if you have someone in your life who you're seeing changes, you're seeing, their skills changing, you're seeing their personality change, you're seeing their ability to use judgment and reason change, like remaining in your own denial about it possibly being dementia or not, can be really, really damaging to that person. And and I think it's so important for people to understand what those signs could be so that everyone can be on the lookout and empower yourself with knowledge and resources and set up your care community sooner rather than later, because your denial is not going to reverse somebody's disease. It's not going to delay its progression, unfortunately. And it's only going to do harm in the long run. So, just being able to recognize those signs, being able to, feel confident in having an open conversation about it. And also to take comfort in the fact that dementia is not only about loss. There's so many skills and parts of the brain that are retained. And just because somebody has dementia doesn't give them a one-way ticket to a sterile mental ward, which is a really, really antiquated kind of view of, the unit.
Right.
But that dementia care really has evolved, and there are people who are putting a lot of research and thoughtful design into programs that really highlight people's retained skills, retained abilities, so that they can still be, expressive and thoughtful people participating in life for a lot longer than folks give them credit for. So that's what I wish people knew.
I just, as a note too, I was thinking about this when using person first language around this. They are living with dementia, but they are still living, right? It's not like we wouldn't say you're dying with dementia. We know that it is a terminal illness.
Yeah.
But you are you are living and focusing on that retention and the skills and their humanness and their identity, I think is also incredibly empowering. Having that diagnosis is not, it doesn't just have to be about the loss and the grief, because there is a time and a place and that will come, but they're alive and they're valuable and all of those things.
Yeah. And you're also allowed to find humor in it, and it doesn't make you a bad care partner.
Yes, that is a great reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think something I'm passionate about, people recognizing about dementia and their relationship to a person living with dementia, is the wisdom that is available to be received by you, right? And just to qualify this statement, not everybody living with dementia is an older adult. People can have dementia at many, many stages and phases and ages of life. It is not an old person's thing. So I guess that's like a half thing about what I want people to know about dementia. And when we are talking about this idea of the elder, right? There's this kind of saying or idea that society makes a lot of olders, but not so many elders. And it is our responsibility as the collective of society to help foster the elderhood of people who have things to share. And so if we think about this arc of life, right, or arc of time, you can see it in lots of references. People are probably most familiar with the idea of like the hero's journey, or something similar, Joseph Campbell, that kind of idea. He brought it back to Western thought. But this idea that in our arc of life, we grow up, right? We've kind of become a being in a way, and then we go out and we live life and have experiences, and then we return back. There's this arc of return in which the purpose is to share what we have learned with our people, right? And so when people are living with dementia and they're perhaps kind of stuck on the out part, right? They're off in their own space or in their own being, we can show up and kind of facilitate this elderhood by asking genuinely for their wisdom and being a participant in that returning of knowledge. And I think that's something that is really powerful intergenerationally or even from peer to peer, but really leaning into what does someone have to offer me in terms of wisdom or wants to express back about what they've learned through their life, and then holding the space and facilitating for that. It can be all the way up to leading a therapy group and like facilitating that structurally, or person to person having a conversation with grandma and really sitting and listening to what they have to say. So that's something that I wish more people would see when they think about dementia, is the retained, like Erin talks about, this retained abilities and also this gathered wisdom that needs a place to go. Really, that's what's happening towards end of life, is we're trying to give back whatever we've learned on our own personal arc. So I really encourage people to lean into that a little bit more.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that is the beauty of legacy work as like a big umbrella term, and also the workbooks that you guys have created, which I think is so valuable. I know personally for myself in my personal life and in my professional life, I think everyone needs to spend some time hanging out with older adults. Like just spend some time, sit at their feet, listen to what they have to say, make music with them, make art with them, just be with them and learn from their lived experiences, because there is so much value in that as a society we just completely gloss over or don't want we don't want to have anything to do with that. And
yes.
And working. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say that idea of capturing that wisdom and learning from different generations and experiences is something that actually drew me to music therapy work in the first place, was seeing music therapy work in elder care and specifically memory care and dementia. And so that is something that I personally am really passionate about. And I know I've grown a lot from trying to keep that in the forefront of my work and my own life.
Yeah. I think there's so much value too in like people who are not neurotypical and might have a different lens, a different way of expressing, a different way of seeing things. That, you know, there's this assumption of like, what am I going to learn from them? They don't know anything. They're like, they can hardly dress themselves. What, you know, she's got food on her shirt and she doesn't even realize it. What can I possibly learn? But that is so the opposite of what's actually really true is those non-neurotypicals, those people that have a different paradigm through which they're seeing the world. In some ways, I put much more weight into their perspective, their thoughts and feelings about life and about the big questions that I think we need to get over our own assumptions about that and give it a chance.
I could not agree more.
Alyssa, have you ever heard of the Old People Are Cool manifesto or the oath?
No, I don't think so. Please share.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So Link Senior came up with this campaign. I think they partnered with the Alzheimer's Association or proceeds of their, shop go to the Alzheimer's Association. But it is called the Old People Are Cool manifesto. And it really confronts the harmful ageism that's so present in our society. And it really supports and encourages like that intergenerational collaboration to shift how communities talk about aging, elder care, dementia care, non-neurotypical communities and things like that. So I think it's super cool. And you can like publicly declare your support for this manifesto. So check that out. It's called Old People Are Cool.
I'm all about it. I've been told before that this is totally off topic. A couple months ago, I met somebody for the first time and they told me that I talked like an old soul. Like the way that I spoke was like I had seen some things. And I was like, yeah, I hang out with people who have seen some things. They have lived some life and I highly recommend it. Even my catchphrases and like colloquialisms, but not to get too off topic, but I think there's so much perspective and wisdom and humor to be found and just truly enjoy community in such a broader sense.
Yes.
I love that. And old people are cool.
All people are cool. So cool. And if there's any younger people listening to your podcast, something that might be fun to think about. I don't know if fun's the right word. It's fun to me, but powerful maybe, is this idea that, if you're a young person and justice minded or change minded, right? There's this archetypal idea of the youth and the elders coming together to spark radical change because the youth have this energy. They have the spirit of life so fresh and enlivened within them that they have the means to embark on action, right? And when that is paired with the deep wisdom of elders and people who have wisdom that goes out of time, right? Not just this particular moment, but many, many moments from the past, and especially towards real end of life, you tap into stuff even outside of your own lifetime arc. When those two things come together, that kind of deep wisdom of humanity plus this powerful spirit for the moment, really incredible things can happen. So any time you can show up and connect with older folks in your community, you might be surprised what it offers you,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you guys so much for bringing all of your wisdom to this conversation and all of your skill sets and your passion and your heart for this work that you're doing. I think it's such a valuable contribution to the future of dementia care, elder care, self-care, right? We talked about a lot of things, but I love all of the elements that you guys are pulling from, and the work that you're doing is just so profound. So I and really encourage that there are folks like you doing this. And I hope to see more of this attitude take hold as we go into the future. So I want to encourage you guys that your work matters immensely. And I feel so inspired after getting to hang out with you guys for the last hour or so. So I'm really grateful that you all made the time to share about each of you and share vulnerably with our audience and community. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having us. What a fun conversation.
Truly.
Our
Thank
pleasure.
you for
Thank you.
holding us. Yeah.
I hope we
Absolutely.
broke records for how many times the word dementia was used in a single conversation. So that's our
I'm
new
gonna,
benchmark.
I'll tally it up and let you know.